It's 2 a.m. You're exhausted, yet your mind won't shut off. Replaying that conversation from 3 days ago, what you should have said, planning tomorrow's problems, judging you for still being awake. Here's what almost no one realizes. That voice in your head isn't you. And the moment you mistake it for you, suffering begins. Right now, as you watch this, notice the voice, the running commentary in the background of awareness. It's already there, isn't it? Maybe it's judging this video, planning what you'll do next, wondering if any of this will help. Most people spend their lives taking orders from this voice, never realizing there's someone else listening. You, the awareness behind it. In 1977, a 29-year-old graduate student named Eckhart Tolle woke at 2 a.m. in his London flat, drowning in depression and anxiety. The voice in his head was merciless. I cannot live with myself any longer. Then, out of desperation, he noticed something odd. If I cannot live with myself, who is the I and who is the self? In that question, something cracked open. Two things became clear: the thinking mind creating suffering and the awareness observing it. That night changed everything. Tolle experienced what he later called an awakening and went on to write The Power of Now, a landmark on consciousness. Here's the truth he discovered. You are not the voice. You are the one listening. There's a dimension in you that exists independent of thought, pure awareness, untouched by mental chaos. Once you learn to access it, everything shifts. Relationships, resilience, your whole experience of being alive. This isn't positive thinking or controlling thoughts. It's recognizing the prison, then stepping out. Let me show you how that prison works. So if you're not the voice, what are you? And why has this other dimension been invisible your entire life? To answer that, you first need to see what's been blocking you from it. Tolle calls it the voice in the head. And for most people, it's completely involuntary. Here's what makes it so insidious. It shapeshifts. Sometimes it speaks in first person. I should have said that differently. Sometimes second person. You really screwed that up. Sometimes it even impersonates other people. They're definitely judging me right now. But it's all the same voice, your mind, spinning an internal narrative that feels more real than reality itself. And most people go their entire lives without realizing it's even there. Now, thinking itself isn't the enemy. Thinking is a brilliant tool when you use it consciously, for planning, creating, solving actual problems. The problem is when thinking uses you. When you become so fused with your thoughts that you can't tell where they end and you begin. Here's Tolle's core insight. Most human suffering doesn't come from life's circumstances. It comes from unnecessary, compulsive mental activity. When you're lying awake at 2 a.m., catastrophizing about things that haven't happened and probably never will, your body can't tell the difference between a real threat and an imagined one. It floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline as if the danger is standing in front of you. And the mind has a strange addiction. It feeds on negativity. Notice how a single criticism can haunt you for days, while 10 compliments evaporate by morning. The voice doesn't want peace. It wants problems to solve, threats to analyze, scenarios to replay endlessly. But the most destructive thing the egoic mind does is create what Tolle calls the gap. The gap is the space between what's actually happening and what your mind says should be happening. Between reality and your story about reality. You're stuck in traffic. The traffic itself is completely neutral, just cars moving slowly. But watch what the mind does. This shouldn't be happening. I'm going to be late. This always happens to me. Why didn't I leave earlier? Your jaw clenches, heart rate spikes. Stress hormones flood your bloodstream as if you're being chased by a predator. But you're just sitting in a car. The traffic isn't causing your suffering. Your mental resistance to the traffic is. This is the pattern. The mind argues with reality. And in that gap, between what is and what the mind insists should be, all psychological pain is born. Right now, the voice is probably saying, "This is interesting, but I don't have time to be present." I have too much to deal with. Once I handle everything on my list, then I can relax. But that day never comes, because the mind's job isn't to find peace. It's to generate more thoughts, more problems, more mental activity. That's how it justifies its existence. This is the tyranny you've been living under. Your thoughts have been running your life, creating your emotional states, dictating your experience of reality. But here's the disturbing part most people never see. This mental pattern doesn't just create thoughts. It creates an energetic entity inside you that actively feeds on negativity. Tolle calls it the pain body. And once you understand how it works, you'll see why insight alone has never been enough to set you free. So, if the pain body feeds on unconsciousness, what starves it? Presence. But presence isn't a feeling you cultivate or a state you achieve. It's a dimension of yourself that's been here the entire time, hidden beneath the noise of thought. Tolle calls it the vertical dimension, timeless awareness that exists completely independent of your thinking mind. Most people live entirely in what he calls the horizontal dimension, the endless stream of past and future, problems and plans, regrets and projections. This is the ego's territory. This is where psychological time exists and where the pain body thrives. But there's another dimension available right now, the vertical dimension, the eternal present moment where the ego cannot survive because it has nothing to grip onto. Watch how the ego operates. It needs time. It needs the past to build your identity. I'm someone who was hurt. I'm someone who achieved this. I'm someone who failed at that. It needs the future to generate anxiety and desire. I need to become better. I must avoid that outcome. When I finally get what I want, then I'll be happy. But in the now, in pure presence, there is no story, no becoming, just what is. And here's what's remarkable. In that space, the pain body cannot feed. The egoic mind loses its grip. Not because you're fighting it or suppressing it, but because you've stepped into a dimension where it simply has no power. Think of it this way. Your thoughts and emotions are weather patterns moving across the sky. Sometimes stormy, sometimes calm. The ego identifies with the weather. I am this storm. I am this anxiety. I am this depression. But presence is the sky itself, vast, unchanging, untouched by whatever passes through it. When you access presence, you don't eliminate thoughts or emotions. They still arise. But you're no longer imprisoned by them because you've recognized yourself as the space in which they occur, not the content itself. This is what Tolle means by the power of now. It's not about living irresponsibly or ignoring practical concerns. It's about recognizing that this moment is the only place where life actually exists. Everything else is mental projection. The past, a memory trace occurring now. The future, an imagined thought occurring now. The only thing that's ever real is this present moment. And when you anchor your awareness here, something profound shifts. The constant background anxiety from living in psychological time begins to dissolve. Problems that seemed overwhelming reveal themselves as mental constructs. The emotional charge the pain body feeds on loses its intensity. This isn't abstract philosophy. This is a lived experience available to you right now. The key is presence, being fully conscious in this moment rather than lost in psychological time. When you're present, the pain body starves. When you're anchored in now, mental slavery dissolves. The power of presence is available to you right now, not after years of meditation or spiritual practice, right now. As you're listening to these words, notice the awareness receiving them. That's your doorway. But how do you actually walk through it? Let me show you the exact techniques Tolle used to break free. Now let's move from understanding to action. The first technique Tolle teaches is observing the thinker, becoming the watcher. This is your direct pathway out of mental slavery. Here's how it works. Right now, listen to your thoughts for a few seconds. Don't try to control them, just listen. What's the voice saying? Maybe it's commenting on this exercise. Maybe it's planning something for later. Maybe it's judging whether this will actually work. Now here's the key insight. If you can hear your thoughts, you cannot be your thoughts. There must be a watcher in you, the part that observes without getting caught in the mental activity. Remember that energetic entity feeding on emotional pain? This is exactly how you starve it. When you observe the thinker, you stop feeding destructive patterns with your identification. The pain body survives in unconsciousness. The moment you become the watcher, its power dissolves. Not through force, not through suppression, through awareness itself. When you first try this, your mind will resist. The ego doesn't want to be observed because observation threatens its control. It'll create more urgent thoughts, more compelling stories, more emotional reactions to pull you back in. This is normal. Don't fight it. Simply notice when you've been pulled back into thinking and gently return to observing. The noticing itself is the victory. Throughout your day, ask yourself, what is my mind doing right now? Not to judge it, not to change it, simply to become aware. You might catch your mind, replaying yesterday's conversation, worrying about tomorrow's meeting, creating elaborate scenarios that will never happen. The moment you notice what your mind is doing, you've stepped into presence. You've activated the watcher. You're no longer unconsciously identified. You're consciously observing. Try this right now. Ask yourself, what will my next thought be? And watch. Did you notice the gap? That moment of silence before the next thought? That's your first taste of presence. Start with just seconds at a time. When you're walking, notice if your mind is elsewhere. When you're eating, observe if you're actually tasting your food or lost in thought. When someone's speaking, catch yourself preparing your response instead of truly listening. This practice becomes especially powerful during emotional episodes. When anger rises, anxiety builds, or sadness overwhelms you, step back and observe. Notice the physical sensations in your body. Notice the thoughts fueling the emotion. Notice how the emotion wants to create a story, find someone to blame, justify itself. You don't suppress the emotion or pretend it's not there. You observe it with the same detached awareness you'd watch clouds passing in the sky. As you develop this capacity, you'll make an astonishing discovery. Most of your thoughts are repetitive, unnecessary, and completely divorced from present reality. You'll see how your mind creates problems that don't exist, how it generates emotional suffering through constant commentary. But more importantly, you'll discover the peace that exists in the gaps between thoughts. In those moments of pure observation, when you're simply aware without mental activity, you'll taste the freedom that's always been available to you. This isn't a technique you master once and forget. It's a way of being you cultivate, moment by moment, day by day. The more you practice observing the thinker, the more space you create between yourself and your thoughts. And in that space, true freedom lives. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds simple, but my mind is too chaotic. I can't just watch my thoughts. They're too fast, too overwhelming. That's exactly why the second technique is so powerful. It doesn't require you to control your mind. It works by redirecting your attention to something the mind can't dominate, the aliveness of your body. The second technique Tolle teaches is inner body awareness, accessing the dimension of stillness that exists within you right now. This isn't mystical. It's as practical as learning to ride a bicycle, and just as life-changing. Here's what most people miss. Between every thought, there's a gap. Between every breath, there's a pause. Between every sound, there's silence. These gaps aren't empty. They're full of presence, full of the aware space that you are. Let's practice right now. Start with your breath, but not the way you might think. Don't try to control it or make it deeper. Simply become aware of it. Feel the air entering your nostrils. Notice the pause between the in-breath and the out-breath. Feel the gentle expansion and contraction of your chest. As you do this, something remarkable happens. Your mind begins to quiet. Why? Because when your attention is fully absorbed in present moment sensation, there's no mental energy left to fuel compulsive thinking. You've redirected consciousness away from mental noise and into the aliveness of this moment. Now go deeper. Sense the space inside your body. Not thinking about your body, actually feeling the aliveness within it. Feel the energy in your hands, the tingling in your arms, the subtle vibrations throughout your torso. This inner energy field is always present, but usually overshadowed by mental activity. This is your secret weapon for stopping worry and overthinking the instant it starts. You can't think your way into this space. You can only be aware of it. Here's how to use this. The next time you're waiting, in line, in traffic, for an appointment, instead of automatically reaching for your phone or getting lost in thought, use it as an opportunity. Feel your feet on the ground. Sense the aliveness in your hands. Notice the space around you and the space within you. This practice becomes especially powerful during stressful situations. When you feel overwhelmed, when your mind is racing, when emotions are intense. This is precisely when accessing inner body awareness is most valuable. It's like finding the eye of the hurricane, the still center within the storm of mental activity. The gap between thoughts is always available, but it becomes more noticeable as you practice. Sometimes it's just a split second of silence. Sometimes it extends into longer periods of stillness. Don't try to force it or make it last longer. Simply appreciate it when it appears, like recognizing a friend in a crowd. What you're really doing is training your attention to rest in, being rather than doing, stillness rather than mental movement, the present rather than psychological time. When you practice these two techniques consistently, observing the thinker and accessing inner body awareness, something profound begins to shift. The voice loses its grip. The pain body starves. The gap between you and your thoughts widens. Let me show you what that transformation actually looks like. When you consistently practice observing the thinker and accessing inner body awareness, something profound shifts. You're no longer living primarily through the filter of mental commentary. You're experiencing reality directly, immediately, without the constant interference of the thinking mind. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, but when it begins, the changes are unmistakable. In relationships, when your partner criticizes you, instead of immediately defending yourself or withdrawing in hurt, part of you remains present, watching the urge to react without being consumed by it. You hear what they're saying without making it mean something about your worth. In career decisions, instead of making endless pros and cons lists that leave you more confused, you access a deeper knowing. A sense of rightness emerges from stillness, not mental calculation. You know what feels aligned through direct sensing, not analysis. In daily challenges, when your boss gives feedback, instead of ruminating for 3 days, you hear the information, take what's useful, and let the rest pass through without creating a story about your competence. Perhaps the most significant transformation is in your relationship to problems. The mind loves problems. They give it something to do, something to solve, something to worry about. But when you're rooted in being rather than thinking, you realize that most of what the mind calls problems are actually mental constructions with no basis in present reality. Real challenges still arise, of course, but you approach them from a completely different state of consciousness. Instead of creating additional suffering through mental resistance, you deal with what's actually happening in this moment. You take whatever action is required without the emotional drama. This doesn't mean you become passive or indifferent. On the contrary, you become more effective. Your actions arise from clarity rather than confusion, from presence rather than reactivity. You respond to life instead of reacting to your thoughts about life. The pain body, which once seemed so powerful and overwhelming, begins to lose its grip. When old emotional patterns arise, you recognize them as temporary visitors in the space of presence. You might still feel anger, sadness, or fear, but you're no longer completely identified with these states. The watcher remains untouched, observing the emotional weather pass through. This is the vertical dimension at work. While the horizontal plane of your life may be in chaos, deadlines, conflicts, uncertainties, you remain anchored in the depth that cannot be disturbed. External circumstances still change, but there's something in you that remains stable. This is what Tolle means when he talks about building your house on rock instead of sand. When your identity is rooted in the thinking mind, in your achievements, relationships, circumstances, any change can shake your foundation. But when your identity is rooted in presence itself, you found the unshakable foundation. You're still fully engaged with life, but you're no longer enslaved by every thought and feeling that arises. You respond from presence rather than react from unconscious patterns. This is the freedom Tolle discovered that night in his London apartment, and it's available to you right now. Not someday, not after years of practice, right now. Everything we've covered points to this single realization. Technique 1. Observing the thinker. Ask, what is my mind doing right now? And recognize you are the watcher, not the thoughts. Technique 2. Inner body awareness. Feel the aliveness in your body. Notice the gaps between thoughts, and rest in that stillness. These aren't just meditation exercises. They're your escape route from the prison of compulsive thinking. They're how you step out of psychological time and into the power of now. Here's your challenge for the next 24 hours. Treat the voice in your head as a separate entity. When it starts its commentary, judging, worrying, replaying the past, rehearsing the future, simply say internally, "Thank you for your input, but I am the watcher now." This simple act of separation is the first crack in the prison wall. The pain body will resist. The ego will create urgency, drama, compelling reasons why you need to return to unconscious thinking. This is normal. This is expected. But you now know the truth. You are the aware space in which all of these temporary phenomena arise and disappear. Most people will watch this video, feel inspired for a moment, and then let the mind pull them back into its patterns. They'll say, "I'll start practicing tomorrow. Let me finish this project first. I'll try it when things calm down." But there is no tomorrow in presence. There is only now. The question isn't whether you understand these concepts intellectually. The question is, will you practice them? If this glimpse of freedom resonated with you, subscribe to Meaningful Odyssey and join us on this journey. Each week, we uncover the ideas that bring you closer to clarity and closer to yourself.